Ali Farag, the Egyptian squash icon, is the current world #1, and he has emerged as the most dominant player in the men's game over the past 5 years. Since March 2019, Farag has spent 2 years and 10 months at the apex of the men's world rankings. In the 9 majors played in that period, Farag has featured in 8 finals, winning 4 world titles and finally collecting his first British Open trophy in April 2023. Remarkably, he won the British Open whilst practicing the fasting disciplines of Ramadan. Known as the Raptor, Mr. Fantastic and Spider-Man, his web-weaving brand of attacking squash has captured the imagination of audiences worldwide. In part 1 of this 2-part interview, we uncover his introduction to squash, how going to Harvard almost didn't happen, and the early years on tour from 2015 up until reaching the pinnacle of the men's game in March of 2019. I hope you all enjoy part 1. Welcome to the SQUASHJOHN series of Get to Know, and today I've caught a big fish. I have got none other than the current world champion Ali Farag in the flesh here at El Gouna, and what a pleasure it is to have you here.
It's my
Ali.
pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
We've got a magnificent backdrop here, the golf course here at the Ancient Sands Resort. I've been staying here for almost 5 years now, since 2018. Fantastic event. Amamansi got it going, and what's it like for you guys, Egyptians, playing here?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it's the first really big tournament that kicked off all the other tournaments that are in Egypt. I mean, obviously we had the pyramids back in the days, but that stopped for a while, and then Mansi brought the big events back to our home country, really, and for that we're forever grateful for him.
Yeah, he's done an unbelievable job, and of course, if you just look over to our right-hand side, can't see it on camera, but there's the Conference and Cultural Centre. The inspiration behind that being Sami Sawiris, of course. He wanted to have that place of festivities, and Rascom Development's been a massive supporter of squash as well.
Absolutely. I mean, as I said, they're the first who kicked off all of what's happening in Egypt now in terms of tournaments and in terms of sponsorships for squash, and obviously CIB have come in big time, and again we're very grateful to them, and I mean, this conference center can't get any better, really.
No, it's an incredible. You should look it up online. It's got some real history, and also the dystopian look that Joey likes to mention as well, relating it to the movie Dune. But getting into this now, part 1 of this interview, it's going to be early days until sort of the first few years on tour. So growing up, at what age did you first take the squash racket in your hand, and how did it happen?
I don't remember the exact age, but I would say around 5 or something. My dad used to play for fun with his friends, and then we would go along with him. And then my older brother Wael, who's 2.5 years older than me, has always been my role model. Like, my very first word was wee wee, which is referring to Wael and his name, and whatever he would do, I would follow suit. And then once he started playing, I would sneak in between his practice times, and I would just hit some balls. And then obviously the coaches said that I've got the touch, I've got the talent to start training myself a couple of years later. And then this is when I took it seriously, and then I started playing local tournaments, and I started doing well. And then as a kid, you know, this gives you self-esteem, and you just want to keep going. And then I remember falling in love with the game from the very first day. Nobody really forced me to go. On the contrary, I mean, I would be crying going back home from the courts.
Really?
You know, so it just came naturally. And I mean, how many people get the blessing of finding their passion at the age of 7 or 8? So I was extremely blessed in that regard.
Well, that's the thing that shines through now. I mean, you know, you're 31 years of age, and you're still chomping at the bit, you know, and still wanting to win titles. Now, as early days of your PSA career, actually there was kind of like this small part 1 where you actually played from 2011 straight out of the juniors. You were runner-up in the World Juniors in Ecuador to Amir Khalid Khalifa, who's also, you know, been
coaching against me last night.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, strangely enough, we mentioned that. Great guy. Managed Blackball, the first Blackball that was in 2018. He's doing some great work in squash. And you actually reached a world ranking of 66, more or less as a part-timer, because, I mean, you were not really full-time. But the decision was already made then to go to Harvard and study mechanical engineering. So
not at all. Well, it's all a funny story, really. I mean, I come from a very academic family, and I always thought that juniors was going to be the end of the career for me. And I just played PSA while I was studying my first year at the American University in Cairo. I did my freshman year back home, and I was playing along just to keep fit and still my passion. So why not, whenever I've got a vacation or I've got some few days that I can travel in, I'll just...
You're saying you weren't going to play PSA?
No, not at all.
My goodness.
Not at all.
That would have been a huge loss.
To me, at least. Yeah. And then I was recruited by Harvard, by Mike Way and the assistant coaches at the time, and they asked me to come and play for Harvard when I was at the World Juniors in Ecuador. and rudely enough, I didn't even get back to them. I didn't even reply because I was too attached to home, too attached to family, and I didn't want to leave. I discussed it with my parents, and then 6 months later, I played the British Junior Open, and I ended up winning it. And Mike Way was there, and he met my parents. My parents were there as well, and they asked him, or he asked them, if I'd be interested. So my dad discussed it with me, and I said, haven't we already discussed this? I don't want to go to the US, blah, blah, blah. And then it was the winter break in my freshman year, so I went and played a tournament in St. Louis. So as I was playing there, I called my dad and I said, okay, why don't you come and let's give it a visit. Let's give it a shot and see how it goes. Okay. But I was still not really into it, but why not? Let's try. And obviously everyone who'd heard about it thought I was crazy not to even think about the opportunity of going to Harvard.
Of course.
And then we went for the interview. I had my interview on the 21st of Jan 2011. 23rd, I was home. The revolution happened on 25th.
Okay.
And this
you remember the dates, day by day.
I remember the dates very well.
These are big moments in your life.
Very big moments. And then, obviously, on that 21st, I met the whole team. I met Mike. I met the athletic director. I met the head of admissions office. They were all so keen for me to, and like when Harvard is really keen for you to come, you blush. You know, you just
you're really engulfed by it all.
Exactly, exactly. So I was more inclined, but still, I would rather stay home. And then my parents, when the revolution happened, my parents said, okay, it's not looking very good in our country at the moment. You don't know where it's heading. So you might as well go secure yourself with a good degree. And then it turned out to be the best decision after getting married to Nour. This is my second best decision.
I'll get into that.
This is my second best decision that I've made in my life. And then, Mike, as you know, how much of a huge difference he's made in my life. Off court more than on court, really. And then I was going back home to either work in an engineering degree or stay doing consultancy in the Middle East, whatever it may be. And then I had to serve in the army for a year. And then when you're serving
in the army... Was it a full year, was it?
A full year.
Okay.
But thankfully, my army my service was really lenient. I would go only over the weekends to coach the kids of the generals, to coach squash, which is not bad at all. So I had time to train myself, and they graciously generously gave me the time to travel as well. So at the time, obviously Mike and my brother Wael and Nour kept pushing me to play pro because they thought I have the passion, I have the talent for it. My parents were not really encouraging it, but today they're the most supportive. And then I said I might as well give it a go and see how it goes. So I started in January, full-time January 2015.
Yeah.
And then by the end of the year, I jumped from 80-something in the world to 22 in the world at the end of the year.
Yeah, you were 22, exactly. Yeah.
22. I remember very well. I remember the numbers and the dates very well. And then
TOC, you beat Cuskelly in the qualifying, and you ended up actually playing after, and then beat Salazar. You beat Chris. You lost Chris Simpson first time on the glass court, Grand Central.
Yes.
This is like right from the get-go.
But that was actually 2014. I was still studying.
2014.
John Nemec generously gave me the local spot.
Yeah.
And then I ended up going through the qualies against top players. And then I drew Chris Simpson, which at the time I thought was a good draw.
Of course. So this you're still at Harvard.
Yeah. And then I ended up losing. And then the following year, I couldn't make it to the TOC because of the army service. And then I kicked off my tour at the Motor City. Julian Wellings gave me the local spot at the time. Karim Darwish asked him for it. And then things went a lot better than I expected. But more than the results, really, I was really enjoying it. Like traveling the world, doing the thing I love the most, with the person I love the most, because Nour and I were engaged at the time. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better career,
just
really.
Dream life, dream everything, really.
Dream life. So I just, from that point on, I had a discussion with my parents. Nour had a discussion with her parents, because obviously I have to be honest and transparent with them what her future husband's job is going to look like, and they were both very supportive, and I haven't looked back ever since.
No, you didn't, because I mean, just running through that early stage, you reached the final of the Pyramids, the Al Aram, end of 2016.
Yes.
You got your first platinum win, US Open. Of course, that was CNN headline news, because you and Nour being the first couple to win a major event made you know, the global sort of headlines. A very key moment, wasn't it?
I would say the first key moment, which probably nobody would remember, was San Francisco in 2015. It was the first time I played Chorbagi in 2015 in April here in Guna, but it was quite a convincing win for him. And then in September 2015, I drew Greg Gauthier. I qualified, and then I drew Greg Gauthier in the first round of the main draw. And that night I remember very well. I slept at midnight, woke up at 4. I couldn't sleep all the way through just because I was thinking, how would I feature against the top guys? Would I lose 3-love easily? Would I beat them? Would I get close? And I was match ball up against Gautier. And this is when I really believed, okay, I'm up there with those guys. Yes, obviously to push them is one thing, to beat them is another thing, to beat them consistently is a huge other thing. But it gives you the belief that you're up there. And I saw a lot of room for improvement for myself. So if I improve those things, then I'll be up there with those guys. And then a couple of months later, I reached the quarters of the world champs and I pushed Gautier again into 5. So at this point, I started to believe. And then I worked really hard for another year or another couple of years until I got this platinum win that you talked about. And it was, I mean, I couldn't believe it, like the feeling of it. The feeling, I mean, I've experienced a lot of good emotions throughout my career, but nothing beats that moment when I won it with Nour on the same day.
Yeah, I mean, the first of anything, you know, there's always something really special. And and through those years, I just sort of looked at it, looking back through the history of all your performances, which I had a sort of good scan through last night. You know, 2016 and 2017, I see as that kind of like, they were the cementing years, sort of learning your craft at the top of the game. You got the belief from those sort of results you just talked about, but you were sort of still learning your craft. And even end of 2018, I remember very well, and this is what I want to hit you with. You went out, and there was this kind of a little bit of a quirky story. You went out, did the calculations for the rankings, and if you were going to beat Gawad at that black ball, you were going to become world number 1. But then it went, obviously, it went a little bit pear-shaped.
I remember very, very well.
We're right, thanks,
I remember very well. So 2016, 2017, when I was really climbing up the rankings and there wasn't much pressure on me. But then I thought that, okay, to take the next step, I need someone to be behind me who really believes in me, who's done it before. And this is when I moved to Wadi Degla and I started to work with Karim Darwish, September of 2017. And that made a huge difference again. He believed in me so much that I had no option but to believe in myself, if that makes sense. And there are so many funny emotions that you feel throughout your career. And you want someone who's been through them to either calm you down or tell you that this is normal, or tell you, oh, this is over the top and you need to get a hang of it. So he was, and he still is, the brilliant guy to do that for me. And then 2018, the beginning of the 2018...
I've got a bit of a thirst here, mate. It's quite hot.
Yeah, I know it is. I know it is. At the beginning of 2018, things started going so well all of a sudden. Like I won the Qatar Classic. I think I won another big event as well. And I was getting very close to Mohammed Sharbagi at the time, who'd been number 1 for years. And then going into, you know, I'm a squash nerd, so I have my calculations, I have my own Excel sheet up until this very day to know where You've
given it away since then?
I know, exactly. And then, and then in 2018, Mohammed lost to Gawad in the quarters, and I knew had I won the event, I would have won it, but it was too much pressure at home.
Yeah, so you put that pressure on yourself.
I put that pressure on myself big time, and I came up against a very sharp, talented Gawad.
Exactly.
And you know how much I hate playing Gawad anyways.
Yeah.
So I just couldn't win. But then it happened in an even better way a month later at the TOC, where I beat my own rival, Mohammed Sharbagi, I'd taken the spot from him, coming back from 2-love and 6-2 down. So, I mean, things happen for
You're already going into part 2, but that's okay, mate.
I'm sorry about that.
That's fantastic. I mean, we'll probably take a little break there.
Yeah,
because that was the cue for the beginning of part 2, beating Sharbagi from 2-love down, as you said, TOC 2019. And there were certainly special things to come, so we're going to get into that. We'll have a little sip and we'll be back in a second.
Brilliant.
Ali Farag's won his first British Open here in Birmingham. It's unbelievable. Oh my word. On his 4th attempt. That is staggering, considering the circumstances as well. He's won his British Open. He's been battling back from a knee injury. He hasn't been anywhere near his best, and he's played his best squash since the injury here in Birmingham.
Now please welcome back to the stage your